At WrestleMania 6, Ultimate Warrior did what no other man had done before him: defeat Hulk Hogan for the WWF title. This moment was Warrior's crowning moment and serves as a key part of the enigma that was his career. Warrior endeared himself to millions of fans during his peak, while at the same time becoming hated by many of his peers. Rude and Bret Hart are two of many who despise Warrior, particularly when he was WWF Champion. As Hart would say, he quote prayed for Warrior to drop the belt back to Hogan because he was a bad leader. Warrior's story is both complex and fascinating. He began his wrestling career in 1985 after a brief bodybuilding career. Originally, he wanted to be a chiropractor, but decided pro wrestling would be a better option for him. Warrior was money motivated in his decision to become a wrestler, as he had little interest in the actual industry. Him not being a fan of the sport is something many of his peers have knocked him for. Regardless, Ultimate Warrior achieved great success with the WWE after his debut in 1987. With that success, Warrior captivated a generation of young wrestling fans. Fans who are at the right age at the right time hold Ultimate Warrior in a special regard. He was everything you could ever want in a pro wrestler. He was built like a comic book character, complete with a bodybuilder physique, colorful ring gear, and fluorescent face paint. Warrior would use this natural charisma to become one of the most beloved figures from WWE's golden era. However, Ultimate Warrior is one of the most controversial characters to ever grace a wrestling ring. He is perhaps the most universally disliked wrestler amongst his peers in the history of the business. Combined with how beloved he is by most wrestling fans, it makes for an interesting dynamic when discussing his legacy. To me, Ultimate Warrior is one of the top 30 wrestlers of all time. His program with Hulk Hogan, where he won the WWF title alone, propels him into a different stratosphere, in my opinion. His career was that of a hurricane. He stormed down and took over the wrestling world for a short time before vanishing forever, aside from two very brief comebacks in the late 90s. What makes him so fascinating is the wide range of opinions about him. Some fans absolutely love him and will have him in even their top 5 all time, while others won't even include him in the top 500. Does Warrior deserve the harsh criticism he receives from his peers and fans? Maybe so, if the stories about him out there are true. But with him, it's not just tales and legends. We have actual evidence of the kind of man he was from his own mouth, thanks to blog posts, interviews, and appearances he made throughout his lifetime. There is one story in particular about the man Jim Hellwig and his dealings with a young fan that will absolutely shock those of you who have never heard it before. Warrior is a tough one to talk about because he draws such a strong reaction from fans, whether it's negative or positive. Regardless, I'm going to do my best to unpack the fascinating story of Jim Hellwig, the man behind the face paint and colorful tassels. The goal of this video is to answer a few questions. Is Ultimate Warrior the most hated wrestler of all time? Why did so many dislike him? And is that hate justified? This is WWE's most hated man, the Ultimate Warrior story. When discussing the Ultimate Warrior's legacy, it is important to understand his appeal. Warrior's full-time career with WWE lasted for roughly 4 years. During this short amount of time, he took over the wrestling world. This impressive run made him one of the most unforgettable stars of his era. In turn, he made an impact on the wrestling world still felt till this day. Even though I am a younger fan who grew up in the Ruthless Aggression era, I still felt his impact. My brother is older than me and was a tape collector during the 90s. He collected several tapes from WWF's golden era like WrestleMania 6 and SummerSlam 1990, just to name a few. These shows encapsulate what Warrior meant to WWE perfectly. I was young when I discovered these tapes, so I caught them at a time when I was impressionable. I became hooked on old school WWF. To me, it was easy to see why so many people fell in love with wrestling at that time. In my young mind, one wrestler stood out above the rest, the Ultimate Warrior. The man from parts unknown would grunt and yell about spaceships and cockpits while donning his iconic tassels and colorful face paint.
Hulk Hogan must self-destruct.
To top it all off, he'd burst through the curtain, sprinting full speed down to the ring, all to the tune of his iconic theme song. Warrior was so electric and so charismatic that I couldn't help but enjoy watching him. Now I know that as you get older, you start to realize that Warrior wasn't very good in the ring, like a Shawn Michaels or even a Hulk Hogan for that matter. But that didn't really matter to the millions of young fans that cheered on Warrior and donned his face paint, and I partially could relate to that. Warrior is no doubt in my mind one of the greatest wrestlers of all time based on sheer impact and big moments alone. I know that he was difficult to work with and had a rocky relationship with Vince McMahon and most of the guys he shared a locker room with. But to be honest, none of the controversy seemed to matter to those who grew up idolizing him. Someone who was a casual wrestling fan as a kid, but then grew out of wrestling as they got older, may not even be aware of the bad things associated with his name. And the ones that are in the know might not care. The guy is as fascinating as he was charismatic. I had to know more about him. So I spent hours watching interviews about him and even some of his own interviews. I had to know why his career was cut short and why so many people cared about him. Then you find out about his return in 1996 and all the crazy things he said and did during the 2000s. Throw all that in a blender and you have one of the most fascinating characters in any form of entertainment. Perhaps Ultimate Warrior's most high-profile beef is with former WWE Chairman Vince McMahon. These two had a rocky relationship, to say the least. McMahon, as we all know, is enamored by tall, white bodybuilder types. Warrior fit this mold to a T. He was tall and absolutely jacked like a Greek god. Vince quickly fell in love with him and did not care about his lack of in-ring skills. All he wanted Warrior to do was cut a crazy promo, sprint to the ring, hail the power of the Warriors, and win his match. The relationship between Vince and Warrior was quite good, until it wasn't. Bruce Pritchard said how Warrior was one kind of person towards the other wrestlers and was completely different towards Vince. Safe to say he knew where his money was coming from and acted accordingly. The two had a relationship that mirrored that of a father and son, according to Vince. He had this to say: "Jim and I had this unusual relationship. Personally, we were both on the same wavelength. He was nuts and I was at the time. I'm not now. There was this great relationship we had. No one really knew that." McMahon gave this quote during Warrior's A&E biography. Things first became rocky between the two when Warrior refused to give a kid an autograph, in a rude manner no less. Warrior was forced to film an apology video to the kid by Vince McMahon. This was because the kid was the child of a higher-up at a TV network that was in business with the WWF. This story and the apology went viral after Warrior's A&E documentary released, so I won't spend too much time on it. Vince was audibly frustrated with Warrior for his actions and for not thinking he did anything wrong. This was a great example of how difficult Warrior was to deal with. This incident happened in 1991, and The Undertaker told a story about a time Warrior told a kid to F off at the airport, so maybe the two stories are related. This whole thing went down after Warrior's run with the WWF title concluded, meaning that Vince was probably not too happy with Warrior already. That was due to the fact that Warrior was not working out as a top star of the company the way everyone had hoped. So much so that Hulk Hogan was given the belt back at WrestleMania 7 in an attempt to steer the ship in the right direction. With tensions between Warrior and Vince blooming, they would peak on the lead up to SummerSlam 1991 when Warrior held Vince up for more money, amongst other contract demands. A month before the event, Warrior sent Vince a laundry list of demands, or he threatened to no-show the event he was scheduled to main event alongside Hogan. The list of demands included an extra $500,000 to show up, a huge payday for WrestleMania 7, a set schedule, and higher percentage of his merch sales. I think I read somewhere that Warrior even wanted his own limo to and from the arena or something like that. Vince McMahon has a huge ego, and he was an alpha male to the truest form of the word, so he didn't back down from Warrior's demands. Initially, he gave in, only to renege on the deal immediately after the SummerSlam match concluded. Apparently, he handed Warrior a letter that said he would never be a bigger star than Hogan. Now that's cold. The way Vince tells this story during Warrior's bio made Vince look to be the sympathetic figure in the matter. He painted it like WWE would have gone out of business had the SummerSlam match not happened. He also made it seem like the show could have never happened without Warrior. Vince easily could have replaced him with any wrestler he wanted to. I think Vince wanted to prove to Warrior that no one punks him out and that he couldn't be bullied. Was this the best way for Vince to handle the situation? I don't know. But what I do know is that this is the kind of result you get when you mix two huge egos. In Vince's words, Warrior was a huge star in his mind, and he said how Warrior couldn't differentiate himself from the character anymore. Vince was right about this, as Warrior was not the draw Hogan was when he was on top, not even close. As you can imagine, Warrior's relationship with Vince was never the same after this. He was sent home for roughly 9 months before returning at WrestleMania 8. His run in 1992 was short-lived, as he'd be fired in November after testing positive for steroids. Warrior infamously returned in 1996 in a desperate attempt by both he and Vince to recapture the magic that they had in the decade prior. Jim Cornette and Bruce Pritchard spoke about a famous meeting taking place between them, Vince, Linda, and Warrior. They flew down to Arizona to meet up with Warrior, and he was completely off the rails according to Pritchard and Cornette. Warrior spent most of the meeting screaming about a word he would make up called destrucity, and no one had any idea what in the hell he was even talking about. It's safe to say Warrior was a little bit out there mentally. He then yelled about his comic books, which he wanted Vince to buy $3 million worth. The only thing of note that came from his 96 run was when he no-sold the pedigree and buried Triple H at WrestleMania 12. Warrior was fired again after no-showing several events after his father's death. Pritchard claims that Warrior hated his father and was not involved in his life, so he didn't believe this was the reason for him no-showing. He believes it was because Vince didn't want to buy his comic books and make Warrior the face of the company, and you can hear Bruce Pritchard talk about this on his podcast, Something to Wrestle. The 1996 firing ended Warrior and Vince's relationship until 2013 when he made his way back to WWE through the 2K14 video game. He was then inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2014, just days before his untimely passing from a heart attack. Perhaps Ultimate Warrior is the single most disliked wrestler amongst their peers to ever exist. I don't think I've ever seen another wrestler or personality say anything loving or how much of a joy he was to work with him. I watched hours of shoot interviews in preparations for this video, and I've watched so many shoot interviews about him throughout the years, but I only remember people talking about how difficult he was to deal with, how much he sucked as a wrestler and didn't respect the business. Even guys who claimed to get along with him like Undertaker said how they understood why he had so much heat in the locker room. I found an article from The Sportster about 10 wrestlers who were close to the Ultimate Warrior, and I was honestly pretty surprised by it. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic or speak ill of the dead. It's just that so many people like Jim Ross, Hogan, Ted DiBiase, Bruce Pritchard, and that list goes on, did not like Warrior. I thought he had no friends. But then I found out that he and Randy Savage were actually great friends. Lanny Poffo talked about how Randy was one of his only friends in the business. This was evident by Warrior's touching tribute to Randy after he passed. He was also boys with the Hart family, including Bret and Owen, and he was super close with Owen in particular. He was also so close with Kerry Von Erich that he was a pallbearer at his funeral. And in particular, he had a pretty good relationship with Linda McMahon, which would be described as a mother-like relationship. She was instrumental in his reunion with Vince in 2013. Now, on the other side, Warrior has been a part of some pretty high-profile wrestling beefs that live in infamy nowadays on the interwebs. He literally dropped a 1-hour video burying Hulk Hogan. Do you know how much you have to hate someone to drop a 1-hour video dissing them? In the video, he bluntly referred to Hogan as a POS and accused him of ruining Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth's marriage, amongst other things. He beefed with Kevin Nash. Their beef was so heated to the point that Nash challenged Warrior to a real-life fight. Warrior then responded with a video calling out Nash, and honestly, I'd have to agree with Warrior on this one. He called out Nash for being a has-been and hogging spotlight from the young talent, along with his buddy Triple H. This was around the time when Nash was appearing on WWE TV regularly in the summer of 2011, and Triple H just beat Punk clean during the height of his rise for absolutely no reason. I don't mean to speak ill of the dead here, as I rapid fire through some wrestlers who didn't like Warrior and what they had to say about him. I'm just reading quotes. Jim Ross, who tends to have a positive attitude towards most guys, absolutely hated Warrior. Anytime he speaks about him, he refers to him as overrated and not a nice human being, amongst other things. Ted DiBiase said he couldn't work and didn't want to be better. Bobby Heenan said the same thing. Heenan was injured at the hands of Warrior's recklessness, so I get it. Heenan said Warrior had no respect for the business and anyone in it. Rick Rude had a run-in with Warrior after a match one night, and as the story goes, Warrior was continually being stiff with Rude during their matches, which Rude took issue with. Rude, who wasn't afraid of anyone, confronted Warrior about these issues. Warrior responded by saying, "I don't have to take it easy, I'm the Ultimate Warrior." Rude then decked Warrior in the face and straightened things out between the two. Jake Roberts said he hated Warrior and wanted to punch him out when he saw him backstage at WrestleMania 30. Warrior did end up apologizing to Roberts that night for the things he did to him back in the day, which led Jake to feel differently about him. Jake didn't like him because the two were supposed to work a program together, which would mean more money for Jake, since Warrior was a bigger star. Supposedly, Warrior felt that working with Jake was beneath him, so he instructed Vince McMahon to make Jake ask him if Warrior would work with him. That's just disrespectful and humiliating, but it does give you an idea of who Jim Hellwig Hellwig was as a man. I have no idea if this story is true, but it could be since Warrior apologized to Roberts. Andre the Giant had to teach Warrior a lesson about paying dues and respect due to Warrior being stiff with him. Andre told Warrior to stop hitting him so hard with a clothesline, and Warrior did not listen. So during a match the two had, Warrior went for his regular clothesline spot on Andre. Andre stuck his fist out, knocking Warrior out cold. Andre then left the ring and the match was a no contest. This humbled Warrior to a degree as he became much nicer and respectful towards Andre, even giving the legend gifts to showcase his admiration. Jim Cornette, on the other hand, took a particular issue with Warrior's political views, which leads me to the next blemish in Warrior's legacy. Again, these things I'm talking about have all been well documented, and some of the content here might be sensitive to some viewers, so please be aware. Viceland published a rather infamous article detailing Ultimate Warrior's controversial blog post he made on his old website. They also noted his career as a conservative public speaker. In his now deleted posts, Warrior made racially insensitive, homophobic, and misogynistic remarks, amongst other things. His remarks about Hurricane Katrina victims stand out because he basically said that they were less than human and the world wouldn't notice their disappearance thanks to the hurricane. Not great stuff. He held disdain for actor Heath Ledger because of his portrayal of a homosexual character in the movie Brokeback Mountain. Warrior remarked how Ledger's young daughter would be better off without her father in her life. This came on the heels of the news surrounding Ledger's death from an overdose. Perhaps the most noteworthy incident during this time frame was when Warrior delivered a speech at the University of Connecticut. He made this remark where he said, quote, "Queering don't make the world work," end quote.
That homosexual? Homosexuality?
And told an Iranian student to get a towel. Tensions arose, which led to students yelling at Warrior and him yelling back. Eventually, the cops were called to settle things down, and things were so bad, the organization who booked Warrior for the event issued an apology. As I mentioned before, Bret Hart and Ultimate Warrior were pretty good friends initially. That wasn't until things changed between the two. I get it, Bret is well known for being bitter, so it comes as no surprise to most when I tell you he doesn't like the Ultimate Warrior. However, this is the reason why Bret Hart hates the Ultimate Warrior. When I read about this, it left my jaw on the floor. As the story goes, and this is directly from Bret Hart's book, Hitman, My Real Life in the Cartoon World of Wrestling, Bret was hanging out in the locker room with some of the wrestlers, and the Ultimate Warrior, which he found odd because Warrior usually hung out in his private locker room before his matches. For context, this was during the height of Warrior's run, maybe a few months into his time as WWF Champion. Bret walks out of the locker room and notices a Make-A-Wish kid waiting outside with his family. As Bret described it, the kid looked like he had a few hours left to live and was ready to succumb to his battle with cancer. The kid had on Ultimate Warrior tassels, face paint, and a t-shirt as he waited to meet his hero for his dying wish. A PR rep for WWE tells Warrior to let them know when he's ready to meet the kid, to which Warrior responds something like, "Can it freaking wait? I'm busy." Bret wonders in the book, busy doing what? He's playing cards with the boys. Bret then comes back from his match and notices that the family is gone. He's thinking, oh great, Warrior met the kid before his match, which was the main event. But then as he's leaving the building, Bret notices the family was moved to a different location within the arena. This was done so Warrior did not have to see the family and interact with the kid on his way to the ring for his match. Man, that's some really low stuff if that is true. Ever since then, Bret has hated Ultimate Warrior. We don't really know for sure if this story is entirely true, but Bret has no incentive to make this up. Warrior never talked about this specific incident when he spoke about his relationship with Bret during a shoot interview. Warrior just said that he was good friends with Owen and was good friends with Bret while he was rising up the ranks in the WWE. Now perhaps this interview was shot before Bret's book released, and Bret's books, it really is the only source of where this story came from. I couldn't find anyone else talking about this, so do with that what you will. Warrior did note that Bret turned sour on him later on in life due to bitterness from Owen's passing in the Montreal Screwjob. Honestly, it's a controversial decision on WWE's part to choose to name an award after Ultimate Warrior's legacy, which was known as the Warrior Award. This award was conceived in 2015 and was presented at every WWE Hall of Fame ceremony until 2024. Controversially, the inaugural award was given to Connor the Crusher, who tragically passed away from cancer in 2014 and was a big fan of Daniel Bryan. I say controversially because of this incident involving Warrior and a terminally ill cancer patient, and the remarks he made towards Bobby Heenan, particularly directed towards Heenan's diagnosis of throat cancer, where he basically said he felt some type of joy in seeing Heenan suffer from cancer of the throat since it took away his ability to speak. I'm not entirely sure that Warrior is the correct guy to have this award named after. On top of that, the Warrior Foundation partnered with Susan G. Komen, an organization whose mission is to raise awareness around breast cancer. I've advocated for John Cena to have the award named after him, since he is the face of Make-A-Wish, and as of this recording is a model citizen with no heinous allegations of any sort against his name. Ultimate Warrior is surely one of the best to ever do it in my opinion. I understand that the man behind the paint was maybe not the best role model, but that won't take away what he accomplished in the ring. I feel like most fans of his will look past the bumps in his legacy and choose to remember him for the joy he brought to them as a kid watching. And I can't be mad at that. At the end of the day, wrestling is for our entertainment and maybe shouldn't always be taken so seriously. With that being said, I'll ask you, do you think Ultimate Warrior is the most hated wrestler of all time? Does he deserve the hate he receives, or was it unfair criticism? And lastly, what are your thoughts on Warrior? Is he one of your favorites or do you dislike him? Let me know in the comments. I can't say he remains a favorite of mine as I've gotten older. His matches aren't all that fun to watch once you get past the cool entrance. All in all, I can see why he was so disliked by majority of his peers. I can only imagine what it was like for them to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. But to be fair to Warrior, it seems like a lot of his peers may have been jealous of his success because of the amount he received so quickly. Not only that, but he was no fan of wrestling growing up, which is something generally frowned upon. Just ask Bill Goldberg. The story from Bret Hart's book is pretty indefensible, and again, that is a paraphrase from Bret's book. I have no knowledge of whether or not that story actually took place. This has been a look at WWE's most hated man. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you on the next one.